And we'll start also. We'll refer to the basics, and for me, there are those truths which are always evident. And another thing we'll talk about, and you'll see, because we'll be going through ideas, which there'll be some of them will hopefully be coherent and consistent, and other will be a loose fit. So one of the big themes and really important idea is the luxury of sustainability. The idea that sustainable places, there's something very luxurious, truly luxurious about that, and the sustainability of luxury. There's a term that I appropriated many years ago from the artist Frank Stella called working space. And working space is that space, and my definition of it, is that space which exists both in the mind, and I'll be sharing my working space with you today, and out, that is informed by the architect's basic formal, visual, and ethical palette in the making, the synthetic process of making architecture. The definition of that is, my definition is first, as a verb, making and shaping space. As a noun, it's where one works. It's also the places one makes. And at another level, which is interesting, but a much looser fit, is the pictorial space of a painting. And so the first question I ask always of myself and my colleagues, my students, and we can ask each other is, what's the matter and why does it? Why do essences matter? And why does who you are as a designer, as a client, as a realtor, as anybody matter? And these are the things that I think fundamentally matter. Community matters. Trust matters. And we know this in our relationships. We pay a lot of money to compensate for lack of trust in every working relationship that isn't quite as trusty as we'd like it to be. Stories matter. Optimism matters. Desire matters. Aspiration matters. Leadership matters, and value matters, and values matter. So shared values make culture, and I believe that the goal of all of us in our work is to make cultures of desire. I'm very preoccupied with the beauty of value, in other words, the high design notion of bang for your buck. What's the most you can do for the least? How can you get absolute value out of every dollar, out of every iota of space, whether it's a huge property or a tiny apartment? And then the value of beauty, that beauty actually has value. It has monetary value, it has life, it has value, and ongoing value to us in our life. And another thing I've learned through my projects, for people of means and for people of zero means, is that beauty is a rudiment of human dignity. So two big ideas are beauty and love. They are transcendent qualities that capture the mind's eye and soul, transforming lives and culture. So beauty is to love as pretty is to light, or pretty is to beauty as light is to love. And as my nephew, who's a writer, you might know his book just came out, Jonah Lehrer writes in his book Imagine, he tells us that the brain actually can track 7 things at any one time, and beyond 7 it can't, and the brain wants to move towards figuring out problems. So my feeling is that if a place has 5 nice attributes, you can figure it out, and it's pretty. But once it has more than 7, it becomes beautiful, because you can never figure it all out. You can never track all those qualities at once. I think that's one of the qualities of beauty. It's the same with light. You like somebody, they're pretty, they talk nice, they have interesting work, 3 nice qualities. Once it gets beyond 7, it's like, wow, every time I see this person, I try to figure out what it is that attracts me to them. So beauty and love, very important things. So love of making, love of community, of people, of the land, of nature, of place, of space. Love of making places that aggressively make people happy. I think that's the goal. Whether we achieve it is for others to decide. The idea of the beauty of performance, how a building performs. That's functional performance, that may be engineering performance. Does the kitchen, have all the things in the right place, and the performance of beauty? Are you in a place where the quality of light, the proportions, the relationships are there? Those are really important things. And in terms of the Uber theme today, the beauty of sustainability. What does it feel like, that experience of knowing that you're living light on the land? How does that feel emotionally? And of course, the sustainability of beauty. There's this guy Vitruvius, who was the first architectural theorist in ancient Rome. And so we try to have a Vitruvian practice. Vitruvius talked about fermitas, utilitas, et venustas. Firmness, commodity, and delight as the three fundamental attributes of architecture. Delight being, I think, the defining attribute of architecture. Delight and joy. And in our work, we say that delight is dead serious. It's a matter of extreme gravitas. A nice little ditty here I got from a professor, a colleague of mine at USC, Bob Harris. If the anesthetic is to deaden the senses, then the aesthetic is to enliven the senses. And if we think about it in that way, it's not a luxury item, it's fundamental. So let me share with you some of the basics that inform my work. A love of place, and we start with roots. My roots are in Los Angeles. I'm born and bred here, and this is my take, simple take on Los Angeles. Los Angeles is a world-class city with a peculiar mix of boosterism and ebullience, high and low culture, and nonchalance. It is insecure and unself-conscious about its greatness. It is quaint and edgy. It is ugly and beautiful. It is almost unshockable. It is everywhere and nowhere, and as we look at movies and TV shows, it is both universal and anonymous. So in terms of my roots, I am a son of the Hollywood Hills. I was born at Cedars of Lebanon Hospital, which is now the Church of Scientology, on Fountain, near Vermont. With the exception of 13 years of schooling and when we first started our family, I live in the community I was born in. My mother, my 92-year-old mother, lives in the same house on Commonwealth that she and my father bought in 1948, a mile from my house. And I was born in early December, and astrologist that I am, I say that my sign is Hollywood. Up Commonwealth Canyon is, to the right, others refer to it as Cedar Grove. Now, I'm part of a multi-generational family. I'm a first-generation American, but a Los Feliz blue blood. And me and my sibs, we all live within a few blocks of each other, and our children, all 11 of them, grew up together. We had family Sabbath every Friday night together. Now we have grandchildren moving back into, grandchildren back in Los Feliz. So we refer to Cedar Grove in my family for the last 50 years as Lehrer Forest. Just sharing. Okay, in terms of learning and roots, went to the Hollywood Los Feliz Jewish Community Center, Franklin Avenue Elementary School, Thomas Starr King Junior High School, where I was president in 1968, and John Marshall High. And then I studied undergraduate school at Berkeley and graduate school at Harvard. And in terms of lifelong learning, I remain very involved, particularly in my graduate school. This idea of being part of multiple communities and being engaged over one life is very powerful to me. Vienna is also part of my roots. My mother, my mother is from Vienna. Both my parents are immigrants, and it seems that that time, particularly the beginning of the 20th century. Am I doing that? I think that's okay for me, but anyways, Vienna, and there's a strong relationship between Vienna and the United States. Seductions are important in terms of one's roots. So the seductions of architecture, landscape, family, and home, for me, give me, growing up in LA, the early understandings of the gravitas of delight. So this is my LA. Seen from above Commonwealth Canyon, looking down, you can actually see a little Schindler house in the bottom, and then Silver Lake and downtown in the distance. Similarly, a little higher up from the ridge, and our own little temple on the mount, the observatory. So I grew up really between buildings by Neutra and Wright and Schindler and Soriano and Payne, and built forts with the kids. Built forts with the kids of from the Lovell House at the top of Dundee. I decided to be an architect when I was in 3rd grade. Was in love with a girl who's a Los Feliz family. S. Kenneth Johnson was her father. She brought in blueprints of a high school he designed. And Mr. Mendenhall, they started a firm, Johnson Mendenhall, which eventually became Daniel Mann Johnson Mendenhall, which eventually became Dim Jim, which is now A.E. Com. It was born in Los Feliz. Grew up under the Lovell House. Kenneth Frampton refers to it as the apotheosis of modern architecture, 1928. I believe absolutely the main and primary inspiration for Falling Water. We can talk about that later. Light, landscape, all of the works. Now in terms of Falling Water, when I was 10 years old, I started staring at Frank Lloyd Wright's drawings and just thought them to have unimaginable beauty. The quality of his line, the relationship to landscape, and the absolute the complete visual joy and also attenuated line and so forth. Anyways, the Ennis House, I used to see that looking up Vermont when I go shopping with my mother as a kid and see this imposing house up there and not really know what it was, and eventually came to appreciate it. For those of you who have been in it, you realize how extraordinary it is. In terms of the Hollyhock House, Frank's Romanza, he called it. It was a riff on Southern California and Hollywood, conceived of as a salon for Hollywood. I had the pleasure, the privilege in 1995 of doing the master plan with Peter Walker and my wife and Brenda Levin and others. And that's looking at it a few years ago, the recreation of the historic Olive Grove. And really the Hollyhock House, if you haven't been up there now that the new pines that we planted are of a significant height, the house is assuming a glory it has not had in my lifetime. It is really among the most extraordinary examples of the equivalence of art, building, and landscape. And then sort of early on there on the left is the recreated bosque of trees that we planted many years ago. And this long axial view down the kennels is what they call this arcade, this very important, formative idea. That, along with guys like Caravaggio and foreshortening, were very important to me. Another thing which I think is incredibly important is the human figure and the human form. I started going to life drawing classes at night at Otis when I was in high school, because they are us. It is about form and content. Drawing the human figure is training the eye and the soul, and it always is. It starts with simple, dumb, bilateral symmetry. And if you look at these, this choroi, the Greek choroi figure, you can kind of stand there with a silly smile. Again, not too exciting, simple, dumb. But what happens is, when you simply unweight, and you get this contrapposto pose, all of a sudden you're capable of extreme complexity. As a design idea, that's really important. You start out with simple, dumb ideas, don't get exotic, and then everything else, then as you work it, you get the kind of complexity and richness that you need. The human figure is important because we have immutable dimensions. They don't change. One of the most critical, as far as I'm concerned, this is like Corbusier's modular man, his idea of all the basic human dimensions, is about 30 inches high. It's an interesting height. It's like tables are always plus or minus 30 inches. It never changes. And it's something that's actually becomes a very important aspect in our buildings. immutable dimensions. Michelangelo, you may have heard of him, very talented guy, architect, drawer, sculptor, lots and lots of lessons to learn from him. That he drew the human figure is present. You can see the muscularity in his buildings, the idea of physiognomy, that what you make has form, has presence, has if not literally a head and a body, and that when you design things that they have to be coherent. My favorite pieces of art in human history are Michelangelo's unfinished sculpture and the idea of human experience, the idea of making as revelation. When we were in Florence at the Accademia, there was a Mapplethorpe show there, and just to see how beautiful that is. So we run our studio, we see it as a little as a center of creativity and a culture center. And we draw, we have life drawing every month. So drawing is really important to the work, and it's critical here. The big idea is keeping the eye and the soul tuned. And here are just a quick of some of my own favorite drawings from the last 2 or 3 years of our weekly life drawing. I generally, when I was younger, it was even more so. I used to fall in love with the models after 3 hours, and then fall out of love. And it didn't matter whether they were 500 pounds, or sleek, or man or woman, because the work was to find the beauty. The work of drawing is to find the beauty. In fact, that's always our work: is to find the beauty where others can't, and to find it everywhere. Some of the three-dimensional life drawing that I do. And then sort of my first and always partner is, now that's curious. That's became backwards. That's, okay, that's our first, well, that's my wife there, and that's me. We don't exactly look like that. We've been together for 37 years, and we live in the world of design and family. We work together, we work apart, we work wonderfully together most of the time, but not always, and we're going to do this forever, and it's quite an extraordinary thing. My wife Mia has a very important practice, and one where for both of us the idea of engagement is really critical, and this is our main project, our 3 kids and my wife there, and the idea of projecting forward, whether as a designer, as a professor, as a parent, you project forward through what you create, whether it's your children or your work, and they give back to you by how they project forward. Where my ideas come from are very important. Probably my main mentor, and both my wife's and my main mentor, is the great landscape architect Peter Walker, who has affected my work probably more than anybody. And some ideas from him are spatial audacity and clarity, the big idea of seriality, which of course you know from the work of Warhol and Judd. That you find in nature, you find it in industry, and you just find it everywhere, and it is inherently powerful and beautiful. The idea of flatness, the flatness of the ground plane, and that the ground plane itself is very important. A landscape idea that's extremely important is the importance of parterre, the design of the ground plane. Most architects don't think about the ground plane, and it's really important, and it's actually not that expensive to orchestrate, and a big part of what you see whenever you open your eyes. So low-hanging fruit in terms of design. Minimalism, work of LeWitt and Judd and so others. And then the notion of the abstract sublime. This is at Storm King, if you've never been there. It's the modernist garden outside of New York City. And then some of my living architectural roots, Richard Meyer. That's when I went to the Smith House with him when we were both much younger. This was 35 years ago. From Richard, I get the idea of spatial rigor, the passion for blinding white light, and the notion of rigor in plan and section of a building. This was the place of one of my my major architectural epiphany. This was his apartment, which we visited in 1978, and it's a long story, but it changed my life when he described how I asked him what this thing was when we were sitting there, and I expected him to say that was the bar where his liquor was, and instead he said that was the piece of the wall he pulled out, and that was the solid to that void, and that's what turns on a young architect and changes his life. What can I say? Just doodling and drawing is what, it's like breathing for me, endless sketchbooks and stuff, and it's just keeping the mind active and alive, and I do this as I do everything just because it's fun. My first building was in 1980 in Silver Lake. It's a few blocks from my office, actually, and it was a spec house, and this was the most spec-ish house I could do. My ideas have pretty much developed consistently since then. Another incredibly important mentor was Frank Gehry. Here's a little sketch I made of Frank when he was teaching us a one-week charrette at Harvard for my wife's studio. They were going to do his garden, and that's what Frank looked like in 1970. And some of you may remember, he used to have a big mustache and big glasses. So from Frank, among the things, this quote is really quite powerful. This is Frank talking. It's probing into the unknown thing. That is what creativity is. That is why it is scary, and that is why we avoid it. That is why you got to go to that is why you go to the office and clean the office for 2 hours before you start. Because I'm scared shitless, I'm not going to be able to do it. I live by that. I know that. Every day it's like that for me. I don't know what I'm going to do. So the basics. So from Frank, the idea of finding the creative spark in your work and in your clients' endeavors. From Loyola Law School, you learn the idea of, and from his work, the idea of fearless invention without prejudice. And that from this, the Wask House of many years ago, that ugly precedes beautiful. So invent fearlessly, and do not be scared of ugly. If you're scared of ugly, you cannot be a creative. The first 20 years of my practice, I worked out of my house. This is the loft above it. I felt no need for a public presence. I was building my practice, teaching, and building family. Very quickly, the idea of engagement is incredibly important to me. I do not like the word giving back because it implies a degree of selflessness which belies the pleasure of being engaged in community. In the ethos in our office with my colleagues and students, my children, is to act and live like design matters, like community matters, and like excellence matters, and like values matter, as I said earlier. Develop the ethos of joyful engagement, the payoff of building communities of engagement. I started my practice in 1985. I was licensed in 1980. And the first project I got, a week into practice, I got a call from Joanne Belson, and it was to redo a family room that someone had already designed that was still on paper. So the first thing I did was, why don't I build you a model of what the other person designed before we start from scratch, and began transforming it. Over the years, it became this little campus here. There's a writing tower, and a carport, and a master suite, and a shower tower, which my wife designed, in the foreground there. This is the writing tower. The work here was 10 by 10. The accommodate Mr. Belson's creative habits. Come upstairs, open the doors, pace back and forth endlessly, 20 feet, as long as he wanted to, until he finally sat down and wrote. My first real modernist project was my 30th building, and had I not done 30 buildings before, I would not have gotten this modernist house, a beach house on a small lot in Dana Point. So the basics: light and its shadow, landscape, sun and shade, fresh air, and the emblems of shelter. So these are, when we begin to think about the luxury of sustainability, it comes back to these basics. And they're for all people. This is my first public project in 1998, Homeless Drop-In Center on San Julian, the epicenter of Skid Row. It's for people who live on the street. It's a respite, a place that they can hang out and be safe, or get a clean bed for 8 hours, and the idea of reminding them of the pleasures of shelter. Over the course of its first 12 years, about 12 million visits, done for under $1 million. Down the street from that, a few years later, I did the Jim Wood Community Center. We call this the living room of Skid Row, and basically a place for programming. They serve 1 meal a day there, but a place where it was pointedly optimistic, lots of glass, and not at all a defensive posture. I've never seen graffiti on it. The only thing you do is you paint the bottom 3 feet every now and then because people lean against it. That kind of respect and lack of condescension, I think, is important. For me, this project and the way people talk to me on the street about it, when I'd be standing there like staring at it, and people kind of figured, well, maybe I wasn't another homeless person, although you really couldn't necessarily tell, because I was standing there for a long time just staring. They said, you know, they'd talk about the design. You got to come here and see the color of the clouds behind the white columns. So from that, it became clear to me that beauty is, in fact, a rudiment of human dignity. This is a project we did early in the life of West Hollywood, meeting their courtyard standards, sort of inventing a typology on Norton, 50-foot wide property, 6 units, and each unit is 18 feet wide and 4 stories high. And very much about light and landscape. How do you bring light down to the ground floor? So we made these, the entry was this 4-story glass space that the stairs opened into. And when you look, the landings of the stairs were also in this space. It's also, so you get lots of natural light, and these became a thermal chimney. So the hot air would rise in there, and it would build in cross ventilation. And these principles, of course, apply to all styles of buildings. Style is really secondary, and of course, appreciation for a building's language is critical. This is a recent renovation of a house in Los Feliz, where this was almost a solid wall, and we opened up the dining room on the ground floor, and what became the bedroom, we opened up a big arch so that they could face the garden and natural light. The principles, of course, apply to not more than houses, to campuses. This is a religious campus, Batyan Torah Center in Orange County, about architecture and landscape all together. Buildings bathed in natural light and fresh air, and even in Newport Beach, you know, if you're used to it, you have closed windows without operable windows. You imagine that you can't walk outside because of sometimes it might get below 65 degrees, and that's treacherous. But they got used to it. They resisted. But here the idea that you look at parking, you put cars in a park as opposed to put trees in a parking lot. This is the parking lot for surge parking at the synagogue campus. And then, of course, as a bona fide sacred space, the sanctuary there, about light and its shadow, and creating places that get you into the zone, into the reverie of just being alive. Now, this is a religious space per se, but it's the work of every space. Another really important idea and part of our ethos is that in every project, including the last one we'll look at today, there are no throwaway spaces. Space really counts. This is a recent project, Westwood United Methodist Church, where we, it used to be, you'll remember, a big parking lot. Now there's a Belmont Senior Village there. The space in between the church and the building was the architects from the other building wanted to just make that a driveway. And we said, no, that's bad. Let's make it a pocket park. Again, that cars might circulate through. So we took the space that would have ended up just being a little planter, and we made a little pocket park there. And then, of course, we redid the front of the building. The idea of honoring the boulevard with a pedestrian, maintaining a strong pedestrian presence. So the image on the left is basically, it's again what you might think of a throwaway space, like the last 8-9 feet of the property. What you're going to do there? Well, 8-9 feet in one direction isn't much, but if you make it 200 feet long, you have the opportunity for creating a great ceremonial path we invented this, we call this the processional bench. And you can sit there, you can walk by it, and one can do that in one's house and one's garden, always. When we have smaller properties, the work, well, in any property is how do you have a clear view. You know, a 60-foot long house may not be very long, but a 60-foot long view might be, especially if it's 2 or 3 feet long. And then in the garden, we looked for donor opportunities, so we invented these benches, among other things, with biblical quotes. These are laser-cut steel benches with quotes, maybe 2 samples of them every day that the pastor came up with. And then 2005, I started my practice. I bought my building on Hyperion in Silver Lake. And then Frank Stella, referring to Caravaggio's studio, said he made the studio into a place of magic and mystery, a cathedral of the self. And so this is, in fact, my working space. We are absolutely preoccupied and try to be not laissez-faire about our own creativity culture. And as I mentioned, this book that my nephew just wrote called Imagine, we've been engaged in conversation for many years now about what it is, the neuroscience of creativity. And so we try to really think about that. We pay attention to what works and what doesn't work in our own space. Again, light, landscape, air, hyperfunctionality, honor work, and our space, the idea is that it's about the beauty of making. This is simply an overview of the space, and it's on Hyperion. Our garden is here. The space was closed to that foot, used to be a solid wall. These are our work fingers here. That's the support area behind, our entry stage and conference area. Our main private meeting room is in the garden here, and our research and development room is there. And that's the way we found this space, and we didn't have a lot of money, so we used paint, both to transform it on the walls and on the ground. And then we have lots of events at our, we had one of my employees had a gala for her nursery school there yesterday with 150 people. This was we did one of our clients, they used our space for a gala and they turned our parking area into the patio destination that evening. And this basically is the space, and it begins like this. This is what we found. The good news was it did have skylights. And this is, this was the LA Weekly used to be here. I bought it from a sex toy manufacturer, and no, they didn't leave anything behind, but the vibes remain excellent. And their business is absolutely recession-proof. They bought a building a few miles away, 4 times larger. JT Stockroom, just in case you know it. That's where they used to hang out. So this is the space. Community matters for us. We see our studio as a public and private facility. Our main work is producing architecture. The place turns over in a hurry. A few years ago, Silver Lake Film Festival, probably 20 minutes, 30 minutes to turn it over, clean it up. And we do this sort of probably many times a month. We have an artist in residence program. This is an artist who did an installation a few months ago and then had 2 nights of dance performance in this thing she created in our garden. We do, it's art and artist in residence. This is our, we have monthly life drawing. You're all welcome to come. It's, we have pizza, and we don't do any pinups, and we don't, no critiques, and it's just about the zen of drawing. And we also, as I said, have an artist in residence often. Sometimes this was a fashion designer who was with us for 4 years, and we have events there all the time. Not all the time, but darn often. But the idea is that the place turns over easily. I mean, inherently, somehow we nailed something about the essences of it's an essential office. Not the only one, but an essential office. you know, we have kids groups coming in, we do workshops with kids from school, and so and that's our creative space. So building and infrastructure are invariably delinked. The infrastructure deals with sustainability, but to change the culture of beauty and infrastructure, we really need to we need to keep beauty together. So we did a project a few years ago. This is Diamond Valley Lake here. It's the man-made lake, largest man-made man-made water storage facility in North America. It's near Hemet, 5 miles long, 3 miles wide, and out of that grew the Water and Life Museums. And just the very quick sustainability story is you have a board of directors meeting 3 hours long. In hour one, you present the sustainable ideas. Everybody's joyous. Yes, we're going to do a sustainable building. That's so great. Yay, yay, yay. We're with the times. And then hour two, other board business. Hour three, you present the cost. Everybody goes nuts, has no memory of hour one, and you make a conventional building. So these are qualities. You've all been there, or you're going there with your projects, and you're facing the disappointment and the cost, and that's what it is. But the world is changing slowly. Partnering is what's required to make that happen. Owner, first of all, it begins and ends with the owner, but in between the owner, the builder, and the designers have to be on the same team if you want to achieve excellent outcomes. That building, it took us a year to convince our clients to pursue LEED, that environmental ranking system. They authorized us at that point to go for the lowest level. In the end, we ended up with LEED Platinum, which is the highest level, the first LEED Platinum museums in the world. You can see how it sits in the landscape. That dam there's the museums, and there's the east dam of Diamond Valley Lake. And there you can see it back there. It's sort of like a Don Judd sculpture. Very minimal. It had to be very clean, simple forms to hold its own in that landscape. 550 kilowatt photovoltaic installation. That's very big. About 50% of the electricity is provided by the sun. Best management practices in terms of water. A very important environmental showcase, and it's become sort of an icon of sustainable design. When we designed it, we were interested in making a place that was beautiful. We were extremely opportunistic always about taking every opportunity to make the building better and sustainable, with the idea that, always that was an opportunity to make it more beautiful. The arcade is covered with photovoltaic cells. It's about the reverie of light and darkness and shadow. And finally, we'll move to Rustic Canyon. And for me, Rustic Canyon, as you all know, is one of the most splendid canyons in the city. For me, Rustic Canyon is about Ray and Shelley Cappy, one of my dear friends, and I think someone we all know and admire, is a spectacular architect, person, and leader. And also, my first project there is an old client of my wife's and mine, Jamie Lee Curtis and Chris Guest. And that was a Spanish renovation done over many years down on Mesa Street several years ago. So let's get back to this notion of the luxury of sustainability and the sustainability of luxury. This house started here, this project in Rustic Canyon. It was a 12-year project, so in 1999 my clients saw a house of mine on the Venice Art Walk tour, and they liked the quality of light and our relationships, and said, we would like to do a dining room edition, and would like to hire you to do it. Okay, so it started as a dining room edition, and then we worked a lot that you can see in model forms. We did a master plan, figuring out how stuff fit together, endless models exploring. These are quarter-inch models. You can see I never went to a meeting without a model. And it was 7 years before we actually started construction. And when we began construction, I told my clients that I actually, for the last 4 years, had expected to be fired at every meeting because I am hardwired to be, if we don't get into construction, usually the clients will blame us and we'll be fired or the job will die. But here we kept going and had every meeting that I was scared of going into one was nice, the next one was nicer than the last one, and we finally did begin construction. And you can see the models we ended up building. Our final working model was actually very big. It was about 15 to 20 feet long. So here, a little overview of the house. The house is organized around a 200-foot long north-south spine. Everything feeds off of that. Latimer Road is here. You come in here to park under there. This is the informal entry, or you walk across the property, the formal entry on access with the house. The house is very much an exploration about the rudiments of architecture, starting with formal and informal living. So the formal house, formal living, powder room, cloakroom, bar, formal dining room. Breakfast room is more informal. The great room, the master suite, the whole master suite there. And this is sort of the industrial sector of the house there, the sculpture studio, and the vegetable garden. As Brett mentioned, this house, among the things that was extraordinary about this 12-year process, there was never one argument between the architect and the owner and the builder. The extraordinary builder, Dan Andrews, is here today. We just made it work. One of the things, the tone was set by the client. One of the things that the client understood is that one of the thing means or a modicum of wealth can buy you, if you're wise enough to understand this, is a reduction of tension. How many people go into these projects and make them so stressful for themselves and turn them into traumas? One of the things, but I would say that's maybe more normal. The lessons these people teach us is that if you take responsibility for your indecision and decision and respect people for their time, everybody is happy, does their best work, and you end up with an extraordinary life-affirming decision. So, process. So here's the entry to the house at the end of the long access. We'll see the little sitting area in a later image there. You'll see that the house is floating. That's that 30-inch line. Remember that immutable dimension I was talking about? And here you can see it in the living room. The entrance is there. The house floats off the ground. The living room here is open. Those doors, made in Southern California, Weiland doors. The living room opens up completely, so it becomes a real an indoor-outdoor pavilion, or really a covered outdoor pavilion. And here you see, looking across the patio, and of course, looking across the patio in the living room, I mentioned this idea of flatness. It's unusual to be in exterior spaces that are extremely flat. In fact, they almost never happen because you have to take care of water. So we achieve that here with no threshold or any marking of indoor-outdoor. Of course, the water seeps between the cracks of the stone. That's how it's taken care of. We had the possibility of doing that, so we did it. And it's actually, you feel it, it's very special. It's a very special place, and this is about indoor and outdoor living. So as I begin to wrap up now, I want to tie back into the idea of the luxury of sustainability. So what is luxurious here? We did not design this, and we'll tell you the stats on this at the end, to be an energy efficient house per se. We designed it to be a beautiful house. It was about indoor-outdoor relationship. It was about massive amounts of natural light. It was about fresh air. The house had to be designed as if it had air conditioning because the law requires it, and it had to meet energy standards, but it has no air conditioning because it doesn't need it. It's in Rustic Canyon. So here you see the breakfast room. This is along the central axis. There's the walkable skylight, and above us, standing there, is the owner's, at the end of the axis, built-in benches where he can go and smoke his cigars and not bother his wife when he does that. Here's the dining room, and we explored, we really felt that there was an opportunity to explore all the different ways and the different types of doors you could have to maximize indoor-outdoor relationships. In the great room here, you can see we used actually the bolt-top system, and we used bolt-top paneling for the whole floors, walls, maple floors. But just to clarify this notion of the luxury of sustainability, this is a very beautiful kitchen, I think. It's also bigger than what you need to cook an egg. And generally, luxury means it's more than you absolutely need. And as we move towards the end of this, I want you to think about that notion in terms of sustainability. And this is the way you enter off the street. Your pedestrian entry is here. This opens up, cars drive in here. The sculpture studio is on the left. And here you can see how the sculpture studio works. These are aircraft hangar technology, the wall there. The door opens up, that provides shade for when Mr. sculpts here. He's actually a magnificent sculptor. And there's a view. The house was designed around three or four trees, and you actually can never see the whole house at once. You can't even see the master suite from the living room, even though they're aligned. Here you can just see the roofs are all covered with photovoltaic cells. So in terms of luxury, we needed photovoltaic cells. That's what captures the sun's energy. We needed to meet energy requirements. The owner put more than was needed, in the same way that the kitchen is bigger than was needed. But what in return, for the last year and a half, we finally measured, and we thought, this house doesn't seem to be using any energy. And then they got their first electric bill 2 months ago. This is after a year and a half, and it's zero. So the house produces more electricity than it uses. That includes powering its Tesla sports car and its Nissan Leaf and the sculpture studio. Now the sense of luxury, of living light on the land from now till kingdom come, in terms of the type of things that make you happy, and that the reason why you make a custom home or a custom anything is, I think, profound. And for us, that was the learning there. So anyways, that's it. I think I took a little long. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael, very much. Unfortunately, you have to shift from fantasy, although it's reality, to a very important topic. We're blessed today with Peter Noonan, who is from the city of Beverly Hills and has a very slick presentation that Matt's going to cue up as I speak. And he's going to address the immediate concerns about the preservation ordinance in Beverly Hills that passed, I think, about 2 months ago. You absolutely need to know the particulars on this because it truly will affect your bottom line. So Matt's going to do his, and this is Peter, everybody. Matt's just going to switch on the presentation.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
Right. Oh, thank you.
Really phenomenal presentation to follow. So it's incredible. Really excited about some of those homes in Beverly Hills. I'm not sure if we have any users today.
No, but I wouldn't mind.
Absolutely, especially when you're talking about sustainability. We do have some sustainability requirements in the city, and we've really been trying to take a lead on showing folks in the city how you can design something, build something that is sustainable. Most of our newer municipal buildings are at least LEED Gold, and we've recently completed a photovoltaic array on our parking structure at Municipal Hall that provides shade on our parking, as well as providing energy for our police department and our library. Not what I had planned to speak on today, but I thought that was some interesting subject matter for the group. Really though, today it's Beverly Hills enacted a historic preservation ordinance back in January. I was one of the main writers of that, and I'm here to just give you a brief overview. I know that I've heard it's succinct and flashy. I hope that it meets both of those criteria. I don't know how to advance this forward. Oh, excellent. So just as an overview, very quickly, there's many historic preservation ordinances in place in the state. Santa Monica has a great one, Los Angeles has a great one. We've tailored this to Beverly Hills, realizing that when you look at Beverly Hills as a community, perhaps more so than other communities, we have a number of homes that have been owned by known people, people of recognizable fame. And we really wanted to tailor our historic preservation towards meeting architectural integrity, having an architectural example of properties in the city, much more so than having a number of properties in the city that were at one point or another owned by different known people. So we've tailored the ordinance so that it's a little bit more stringent in terms of its architectural needs and the requirements that are typically placed for historic properties. This limits the scope. We want to just find those homes that are those unique examples. When we talk about place, we're really interested in maintaining that signature place that it would be Beverly Hills. Beverly Hills is very interested in maintaining its brand, maintaining its image of what that means. And so these properties would impart that sense. We don't intend this to be prohibitive. We don't want to freeze the city in time. We don't want to stop new development from occurring. We have great architecture happening even today. Frank Gehry is going to be building a building on Little Santa Monica over by the high school very soon. At least it's coming in for its conceptual plans. We don't want to prevent that sort of activity from happening in the city. We want to make this an incentive for those property owners that do own a property that could be potential. We want to celebrate that. We want to make it an incentive rather than a deterrent. So for the real estate community, it will be important to know, as we roll this out, and we're anticipating this will be July 1st, we do have a real estate disclosure that will be required. This is going to be required. You'll have to provide this prior to the expiration of the inspection contingency. For those in the know in this room, I'll translate this better because I wrote that bank-owned properties exempt. What I mean by that is it's those properties that are going through a foreclosure. So I know that banks do own properties. We're not suggesting that any bank-owned property would be exempt, but it's those properties that are in a foreclosure status. You would not need to disclose that. However, the new owner would be still subject to all the requirements under the ordinance. Right now, we do have a Mills Act, and this, in short, could save a property owner up to 60% in the property value. We wanted to make the room aware of that. Applications this year, it's closing on the end of May. We will have the application window open again from January to May of next year. If that is perhaps the tipping point for a buyer in their decision whether they're going to demolish a home rather than renovate it, 60% could be a lot in savings in property tax. Now, the final note on here is, and I've put it up there, the city does not have an inventory yet. And what an inventory is, the city has been doing surveys for many years. We do know of many of the properties in the city that could have a historic value. We don't have an inventory. What the inventory is that list of properties that you would need to provide the real estate disclosure for. So that will be on our website by July 1st. Very important. It's not every single property in the city you will have to provide some sort of real estate disclosure for, because the first rule of historic properties is typically that the structure is at least 45 years old. Beverly Hills has probably 80% of its properties would meet that criteria. We don't mean that every single property, therefore, needs this. It's only those that are on our list. We're going to adopt that list. It'll be our inventory. We'll have it on the website. You'll be able to go and check that list, verify that the property's either on it or not on it. If it's on it, you would submit the real estate disclosure to any potential buyer. Also, until we get that inventory put in place, we're going to be looking at properties on a case-by-case basis. Now, this is going to be more important to that homeowner that wants to demolish or that homeowner that's coming in for a renovation. That could be, in terms of the sales, that this could be important information. Demolitions right now, we require a 10-day posted notice. That's just across the board throughout the city. Under this ordinance, that would be a 30-day posted notice. It's also a 30-day review period if it's a renovation. This will apply to any property that is 45 years old and done by a master architect. Why is this? That's because we're, at this point, until we have that inventory, we are not sure of what is out there. The image here is of a home that recently sparked this real keen interest in the city. It's the Cronish House. It's a Neutra property. That had come in on a demolition, and with substantial amount of public interest and concern in that property, the city council did put a hold of 90 days on the property. That property was sold to someone who's interested in preserving it, and currently they are moving forward with preserving the property rather than demolishing. So that is the intent of this requirement of the hold period for demolitions and renovation. What is a master architect? It is those persons of recognized greatness. It's also architects of local importance. We do have a couple of building groups and designers who may not be architects, but are still very important to the city and to the development of the city that would be on that list. We'll maintain that list. We've been developing it. We have a draft of it now. It's not available to the public yet, but we anticipate that'll be within the next month or so, and that we will be confirming that list with the council. We do have exemptions for renovation. These are just a touch on them, whether it's eligible. If it's not eligible for designation, if you're not changing any of those features on it that would make it historic, those character contributing features, or if the work complies with the Secretary of the Interior standards. It's really important to realize that, once again, we're not intending to freeze the city in time. We realize that people don't want to live in the spaces exactly as they were designed in the 20s. People like larger kitchens, they like larger bathrooms, they like modern appliances, they like modern conveniences. So this ordinance does not, in most cases, enter into the inside of the home. It's really focused on preserving the exterior of the home. And it's in a way that would not prevent someone from altering or modifying the home. It just may not be exactly what they would like to do. But most of the case, the Secretary of the Interior standards do allow you to do something. So, a big question that a lot of people have been wondering in this case, and I've just presented that we don't have an inventory, is a property, is it historic? How do we know? Well, we have, we're developing an option. It'll be you can apply for a preliminary determination. This will be a director level decision. And some of the nuts and bolts of this, there will be an application fee. We intend that to be nominal. We don't want this to be expensive for the homeowner to apply for. It's a we're intending it to be a 45-day application process. So if you do have a homeowner, they're concerned that they may have a historic property, or they feel that they do have a historic property and they want to emphasize that in the sale, it would be something that they want to determination would be good for 5 years. Within that 5-year period, unless substantial additional evidence is provided, that decision would hold. So if the property is historic, that decision would hold. They would be able to apply for landmarking and take advantage of incentives. Alternatively, if the decision was that this is not a historic property, they would be eligible for going through the typical demolition process and the typical renovation processes without the additional review. Once again, be looking to July 1st as the anticipated date that the real estate disclosure will be a requirement. This is our website. I have business cards with me. I'm happy to, I think I might have enough for the entire room. Here's my contact info as well. We'd love to hear from you. Feel free to, I think that we're going to have questions after this. I'll be here available for questions, but also I'm available by phone and email.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Peter. We have Peter thank you because of Stan Smith, our Beverly Hills manager, so thank you. And I'm glad everybody came. We'll see you next month. Thank you.